Hello all of you creative people. As promised in my previous video/trailer, I'm here to tell you about my journey switching from Unity to Godot as my primary game engine of choice. Like a lot of Unity developers who switched, my main reason for doing so was because of the major controversy that happened in September last year. When making the switch, I decided to rejuvenate my knowledge of Godot by creating a small game inside of 7 days. In my first day of this challenge, I wanted to figure out the premise of my new game. The 3 initial things I want in this game were more polish than I usually put into my challenges, a game that took the best parts of Frontline, and lastly for it to be a mobile first game. After deciding upon the 3 points to focus on, I started working on the grid system to finish off the day. I was initially going to use Godot's tile map system, but ended up deciding to create my own system. The system ended up being kind of based off of Frontline's grid system, but the result was working, and that's all that mattered. Day 2 was definitely way more eventful than day 1, with me starting work on the procedurally generating road system. Like in Frontline, the road is generated by getting 3 points on a grid. Point 0 being the start point and being capped at an X position of 0. Point 1 being the middle point and was able to be anywhere inside of the grid, and point 3 being locked in the last position of the X-axis. After the point positions were found, you could then use A-style pathfinding to connect the points and place down the appropriate road pieces. After doing the road pieces, I started researching on Godot's Path 2D system and working on the initial parts of my enemy system. And to test out my implementation of Godot paths, I've created path followers that show the direction of which the road goes for the user. This day was fully about implementing my enemy system. So first I created the sprites for all of the enemies, with each enemy being a polygon starting from a triangle and working my way up to a decagon, and then finally creating a circle as more of a boss enemy. I then started writing my enemy script, which would basically just hold a couple variables like their health, their damage, etc. because they wouldn't be moving themselves and instead would be being moved by my wave manager script, which was a port from Unity and Frontline that I did into Godot. After those 2 systems were done, I created a shader that would generate a random background whenever given a seed. And during the process, I realized that Godot had a pretty dumbed down version of the OpenGL shading language, and it did take a little bit of getting used to. This was the day where I finally created the towers. To keep the game as simple as possible, I decided I was going to have a maximum of 6 towers. So after playing a bit of Frontline, I had my pick. The first one was the laser tower. The second one was the basic tower. The next one was the missile tower. The fourth one was the bank tower. The 5th one was the spike tower, and the 6th one was the multi-point tower, which is one of the most recent towers I added to Frontline. And I thought that these 6 towers would provide the greatest variety in the ways that the player could play the game. So I started by designing their icons and their actual sprite. After a little bit of procrastinating, I started coding them. Starting off, I created the basic tower script that all of them would derive from. Its only purpose is to provide a place for me to keep functions and variables that I wanted all the towers to have, like getting the closest enemy or checking whether an object was in range. After that, I coded the actual scripts for each of the towers, and by the end of the day, I was very mentally exhausted. So, on to the next one. Day 5 is definitely considered to be the power-up day. This was a system I had planned from the very beginning to be inside of the game, in which every single tower, once they reach level 5, would give the player an option to activate a powerful power-up that would benefit the player in one way or another. So the power-up for each of the towers are that the bank tower increases the player's money, the missile tower instantly kills half of the enemies that are currently spawned, the basic tower increases the knockback of all of the towers by a massive amount, the spike tower instantly fills the map with tons of spikes, the multi-point tower increases the fire rate of every single tower, and lastly the laser tower, which is definitely the weakest, is the tower that gets rid of one of the areas where you can't build. Each of the power-ups are active for a specific amount of time based on how powerful they are, but they do all have the same cooldown time of about 40 seconds, except for the laser tower because of how weak it is. This was probably the most painful day for me, with it mainly being filled with me struggling, failing, and then barely succeeding to create a saving and loading system, and I have to say most of it wouldn't have been possible without the Save Made Easy add-on from the Godot asset library. It truly reminds me of Easy Save 3 from the Unity asset store, if not being even slightly better, but I do recommend both of them. When making the save system, I prioritized making save files as small as physically possible by using indexes for arrays that are found in my build and wave manager scripts rather than saving entire pack scenes. And then I could use the same systems I already set up for, let's say, building a tower when spawning them in, which is why code modularity is very important when developing games, and it definitely saved me a bit of time. The last and final day had me with a bunch of free time, so I made a short mini game for people to play after their tower defense game to revive and continue their previous game. If the player was able to get a score above 25, they would get some extra money to fund their comeback, and they would be reloaded back into their previous save file with full HP. The rest of the day was all about bug fixing, UI improvements, and polishing up the general user experience of the game. By the end of the day, I had a tower defense game I was pretty proud. After having polished the game by the end of the week-long challenge, I then started work on releasing the game to the Google Play Store and itch.io. I got stuff like images and marketing material done during this day, and I got some closed beta releases uploaded. This game is currently available on Google Play Store and itch.io for all to play. There will be a link in the description for both links to play the game. Anyways, that's been this video for my new game, Endless TD. If you want, remember the links in the description below, and I guess I'll see you guys in the next one soon.